Hello, my name is Miss Camilla and I work here at Phinizy Swamp in Augusta, Georgia, and I am going to be doing a demonstration with you guys today with something called an Enviroscape. So if you look down, what we basically have is a model of a town, and what we're going to be doing is we are going to be talking about watersheds. And so the first thing I want to do is define what that means. So a watershed is basically an area of land where whenever it rains, all of the rain flows down into the same body of water. So if a raindrop falls over here on our mountains, it's going to roll down the side of the mountains, across the golf course, over the road, into the river, and down into our lake. If it rains over here on our construction site, it's going to go down the hill, through the neighborhood, might go into this storm drain, come out into the river, and end up on our lake. And if it rains over here on the farm, it's going to go across the farm, into the lake, and so on. So basically a watershed is decided based on the hills and topography of the land. So if it rains anywhere on this town, all of that rain is going to flow down into this lake. So watersheds are usually named after the body of water that all the water goes to. So if we named this Phinizy Lake, this would be the Phinizy Lake Watershed. So we are going to add some water into our town because we need some water in our lake. It is very important to us. So we're going to let our rivers flow. All right. Now, we have got water in our rivers and water in Phinizy Lake. And this is important because this lake is an awesome place for us to go. We like to go swimming, we love to go boating, we want to go fishing, and our drinking water plant is actually pulling water from this lake so that we have water that comes out of our faucets at our home. So, our lake is very important to us. Now, there are some things that could cause problems with our rivers and our lakes, so I want to talk about that. We're going to talk a little bit about pollution. So we are going to be adding some pollutants into our town, and we're going to talk about what could happen to our waterways. So the first thing I want to talk about is trash. So a lot of us, when we think of pollution, we probably picture trash, and a lot of times right now that usually means plastics. So we have some sesame seeds that we are going to use to represent trash, and we are going to sprinkle some into our town where we think we might find some trash. So if we look over at the construction site, our workers, they had McDonald's for lunch and they couldn't find a trash can. So they just left it on the ground. They thought, we'll pick it up later. So we're going to sprinkle a little bit of trash around our construction site, okay? Now, our neighborhood, it was trash day yesterday, so everyone put their trash cans out on the road, and there happened to be a big gust of wind, and a couple of them got knocked over, and the trash flew away. So we've got some trash on the road, and we have a highway that runs through the town, and I'm sure all of you have probably seen trash on the side of the highway. A lot of times what happens is maybe we have some trash in the back of our trucks, and as we're driving we forget it's there and the wind picks it up and it ends up out on the road or on the side of the road. Also, sometimes people think that it's okay to throw things out their windows like orange peels and apple cores because it might break down, but that can cause problems too. So we might talk about that in a second. So now, let's talk about a different kind of pollutants. We are going to talk about some oil or gas that could be leaking, or some chemicals that are being dumped. So, if we look back at our town, we have a few pieces of equipment that might be leaking. So, for instance, over here at the farm, we have a tractor, and maybe it's a really old tractor. Our farmer did not get a new tractor recently, and he did not realize that his tractor is leaking. Now, we also have some cars on the road, and we have lots of cars come through the town. This is a bustling place to be, and these cars might have some leaks as well. So we are going to put some oil or gas leaks on the road. And over here on our construction site, maybe our equipment is also leaking over here. We've got lots of leaking things in our town, so we are going to put some of that around here. And maybe some of our cars in our neighborhood are leaking too. So that covers the gas and oil but we need to talk about chemicals. And we have a big problem in our town because our factory, where a lot of our parents go to work, is actually producing plastics, and they have lots of different kinds of chemicals they use. And they are doing something that they're not supposed to be doing. So what they have is a pipe that comes out of the factory, and they are dumping their chemical waste into that pipe. And let's see what happens. So you should see that yellow making its way down the river and into our lake. And we'll talk about what's happening with that in a little bit. So we have covered oil, gas, and chemicals. Let's move on to another type of pollutant. We have a farm here, and they're growing corn. And our farmer really wants his corn to grow fast and big and strong. And he knows that he can help it out if he adds some fertilizer. And what fertilizer is it has lots of extra nutrients in it, and those nutrients are going to help the plants grow. But the problem is that he is adding way too much fertilizer. So we are going to add fertilizer to our crops. And oh my goodness, look at all that fertilizer. So now these crops are going to grow really fast and really big. But he has another problem. He's worried that he's going to have weeds and bugs eating his corn and fungus growing on his corn and making it not good to eat. So he's going to use something called pesticides. And what these do is they kill the weeds and they kill the bugs and they get rid of the fungus. But again, he's adding way too much. So we're going to add some pesticides to our farm. All right, but he's not the only one in the town who's using fertilizer and pesticides. We also are competing in our neighborhood for best lawn of the month, and we are taking it very seriously. So we are going to be adding fertilizer and pesticides to our yards because we want that grass to be looking good. So there's some fertilizer and some pesticides. All right. So we have fertilizer and pesticides in our town now. We're going to move to another kind of pollutant. Oh, you know what? I forgot about the golf course. You guys know that golf course has to be looking good year round. So they are going to be adding fertilizer and pesticides because they want their grass to be green and pristine, and they definitely don't want any weeds. I know here in Augusta we have the Masters golf course, and they are definitely maintaining that grass. Okay, so let's move to a kind of faux pas pollutant that a lot of people don't like to talk about, and that is poop. And these chocolate sprinkles are going to represent our poop in our town, and we're not talking about human, because we do have a wastewater treatment plant right here that is helping remove all of our waste from our water before it goes back into the river, so that's covered. But the problem is that a lot of people don't realize that our dogs pooping in our neighborhoods is actually a problem too. So let's start with dogs, because I know that a lot of us probably have dogs at home. I know I do. I love her to death. But it's really hard to convince yourself that you need to pick up their poop every single time. So I want to tell you a little bit about why in just a little bit. But first, we're going to add some poop into our neighborhood because we're all walking our dogs and they are leaving some presents behind. Now we also might find some poop over in what used to be the forest. You can see over here, these are tree trunks. We cut down these trees so that we could build our neighborhood expansion over here at the construction site, but we still have some animals that live there. So we are gonna sprinkle some poop on the mountains, and we are going to move over to the farm because you can see we've got some cows. And we have dairy cows, but you know what? They're pooping too. So we have manure over here at the farm. Okay, so now we have covered poop. We're gonna move to our last pollutant that we're gonna talk about today, and that is loose dirt. So a lot of people don't realize that loose dirt is actually a pollutant that can cause problems. And the reason is because of something called erosion. So when dirt moves from one spot to another, that is erosion, and that is bad, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But everywhere on the town that you can see brown, we're going to sprinkle some loose dirt. Okay, this is some cocoa powder. and we're gonna see what happens with that. So our construction site, we cut down all the trees over here, we removed all the grass over here, so all the roots of those plants are gone, and we've got lots of loose dirt. The sides of our highway over here, we've got lots of exposed dirt. And then of course our farmer, he had to till up the land so that he could plant his seeds, so we've got some loose dirt over here as well. And we have a dirt road. Oh, and you know what? These cows right here, they love to go in and out of this river because they will play in it, they'll drink it, they'll cool off, but that's causing problems because they're actually kicking up dirt and causing the banks of the river to collapse. So we're gonna add some loose dirt right there too. All right, now we have lots of pollutants in our town, and right now our water, our lake is still not looking too bad, right? But here's the problem. A big storm is rolling in and it's about to rain. So we are gonna make it rain on our town, and we are going to see what happens. It's raining everywhere. And remember, we talked about watersheds earlier. When the rain hits the ground, it's all gonna roll downhill to the lowest point. And in this town, that is our Phinizy Lake. But this time, it's not just water that's coming into the lake. There's other stuff coming down too. All right, so now that our very heavy storm has come through, our lake looks a little bit of a mess, doesn't it? So this is a problem. Do you think that we want to go swimming and fishing and boating in this lake anymore? Probably not. I know I wouldn't. And it's also a problem because this is still our drinking water source. Now, I'm not saying that we are drinking directly from our lake, but when we send this to the drinking water plant, they have to work extra hard to clean it up because we've added so much pollution to it. So now I want to talk about some problems that are being caused and then some solutions to our pollution. So let's talk about the dirt for a second, because I think that a lot of people don't realize what happens when we have so much extra dirt in our water. So when it rains and the dirt is picked up and it's carried down, it basically fills our waterways with loose dirt all in the water column, and our fish and other creatures that have gills have a really hard time breathing, and so their gills will get clogged up and it's hard for them. And it also will change the pH and the temperature of the water, which affects all types of things too. Now our poop is a big problem because we have domesticated lots of animals over time, humans have. And basically what that means is we have animals that are no longer wild, that are only there because we put them there. And just like I said, I have a dog at home and she would not be living in my neighborhood if I did not bring her there, right? Now I'm not saying we need to pick up all the wild animals' poop. I'm not gonna tell you to go out in the woods and pick up after the deer and the raccoons and the bunnies and all that stuff. But we should try to do our part to pick up after our animals that are like our dogs and our cows, because we have so much extra poop in our natural system that's flowing down into our water that we have a problem. We have lots of things that are in our waters, such as fecal coliform and E. coli, that wouldn't be there if we didn't have so much extra poop. So we got to work to help with that. So those are a couple things that I wanted to talk about as far as what's happening. But now I want to talk about some solutions. So let's start with the trash. I think that we could probably, to fix what we have going on right now, is we could get the whole town together and we could pick up trash and we could install some trash cans and some recycling bins so that we have a place for all that trash to go. And maybe we can put some signs that say no littering. You guys have probably seen the signs that say there's a fine if you litter, and that's because we don't want all this trash in our town, especially not in our waters. And that reminds me, I want to talk about something that is called point source versus non-point source pollution. And these are two categories that scientists will put our pollution into, and I'm going to tell you what that means. So a point source pollutant is something that you can physically point to the source and say, I know with 100% certainty that this piece of pollution came from there. For instance, if we look under this bridge right here, we can see this pipe is still full of those yellow chemicals, and we can point to it and say that factory is producing that pollution. So this pipe is our reason that we can point to it and say those chemicals are coming from that factory. So that's a point source pollutant. Another example is if we look over here at our wastewater tanks, they're cleaning up the water, and these were not designed very well because if you watch, when it rains, look, it's overflowing and it's going right into that river. So we can point right here and say, look, there's the wastewater coming out. This is a point source pollutant. But going back to the trash I was talking about, if we look at this piece of trash, do we know exactly where it came from? We don't. So if we look around the town, we could say, okay, maybe it was the construction worker. Maybe it was the trash from our neighborhood. Maybe it was the farmer. Who knows? But it washed down and it came to our lake, and we don't know where it came from. So that makes it a non-point source pollutant. And that's true for our sediment in the lake as well. And it's a problem because we don't know where it came from. But those are the two categories, point source versus non-point source. And basically the reason we have non-point source pollution is because of runoff. And what runoff is when a raindrop hits the ground and it rolls down a hill, it is going to run off to another spot. But when rain goes down hills, it'll pick up things along with the rain and carry that down into the waterways. And so this trash ran off with the rain and came down into the lake. So watersheds and runoff kind of go together. Now I want to talk about some other solutions to our pollution. So we talked about trash. Now let's talk about our leaking gas and oil. So we have old tractors and maybe some old cars that are leaking, and you know what? We need to get a mechanic in town because this is not okay. If you notice that your car is leaking all types of stuff, not only is it not safe for you, but you are contributing to pollution into our waterways. So we are gonna try to help educate our citizens about why you need to fix the leaks, and hopefully we can do that together in our town. But we have a problem over here with our factory, right? They were dumping those chemicals directly into our river. That's not okay, and they're actually breaking the law. So what the government would do is they would tell them, we're gonna be fining you and we may even shut you down until you fix this. So we're gonna work with the factory because this is where a lot of our economy comes from for our town. We're gonna get them to send their waste to the wastewater treatment plant instead. And that way they can clean up the water and it'll be healthy again before they put it back into the river. All right, now let's talk about fertilizer and pesticides. I'm not gonna say that you should not use these because I will even use fertilizer and pesticides sometimes. But you should always read the instructions on the packaging of the things that you are using, because the problem arises when we add too much and if we add it right before it's about to rain. Because like I said, that rain will land and we've got runoff that's picking all that stuff up and carrying it down into our waterways. So we just have to be more mindful about how we use these things, and maybe we need to teach our citizens about that too. All right, let's go back to the poop. What can we do to help people pick up after their dogs? I think that we should install some poop scoop stations. You guys have probably seen those things that have the bags you can grab and a trash can so you can pick up your dog's poop easily and put it away. And maybe we can help give out those really cool things that attach to your leash that hold the bags for you. I know I have one of those, and that reminds me to pick up after my dog. As far as the cows go, that's a little different, right? Farmers aren't going to go around with little baggies and pick up all the piles of cow poop. But what this farmer can do is he can actually use some type of container to collect his cow's manure, and he can use that manure for fertilizer on his land, and that's going to save him some money as well. So we will work with him to do that, and that manure will hopefully not be going into our river anymore. Now let's talk about erosion. So our dirt is eroding because it's raining, it's windy, the cows are walking on it or driving our cars on it, our equipment is on it, and that's kicking up the dirt and it's moving to another spot. And just like we talked about, we don't want to be messing up our habitats in the water with dirt. So there are a few different things we can do. Let's focus on one thing at a time in our town. So let's start with what used to be our forest. Now we just have tree trunks up here on the mountain and lots of brown dirt. We are going to replant some plants, some native plants into our forest. So we're going to put some trees back. And what that's going to do is these plants' roots are going to do a great job of holding that dirt in place. And you know what? It's okay for us to use trees to build things sometimes. I don't want you to think that I'm saying we shouldn't cut down trees, because I know that that's important, but we have good forestry practices that we can practice as well to help prevent this from happening in the first place. So we're going to replant those trees, and now hopefully all of this brown will become green and that dirt will stay in place. But now we need to talk about our construction site. So construction workers, they have flattened all this land down and torn up the grass, and that dirt just left as soon as it rained. And we are going to add something to block that dirt from going anywhere. We're going to use our imaginations and pretend that these are silt fences. And you could do patches of plants as well, but what silt fences are, you guys have probably seen a construction site before, and they have those fences that look usually like black or orange netting. They're low fences around the edges of the construction site, and those are silt fences. And those are there so that when it rains, all that dirt that was torn up, it can't go anywhere. So it's not going into the rivers to mess up the fish. So we have put silt fences around this construction site. All right, now we have some loose dirt over here on the side of the highways. We've got erosion going on. And what we could do is we could plant some plants here. We could put a rain garden. We could even turn this into a wetland. So we are gonna pretend that these are wetlands, and we are going to put that right there, and this will help stop that dirt from eroding in the first place. And I want to talk about our farm over here. So you'll notice right here our land looks kind of weird, and that's because they actually tilled up the land right here and turned it into farmland, and it used to be a wetland. So what we can do is actually what the government can do is give their farmers a tax break and take that land and turn it back into a wetland. And what that will do, just like we did over here, is when it rains, instead of that dirt going straight into the lake, it's going to hit this wetland first. And this wetland is full of plants that are slowing down the water, and that allows the dirt to settle to the bottom and not go out into the lake. And so wetlands do a really great job of filtering our water naturally. So that's going to help the farmer keep his dirt on his land. All right, so we have talked about watersheds, we've talked about runoff, point source and non-point source pollution, and hopefully you guys learned a few things along the way. We here are in the Butler Creek watershed at Phinizy Swamp. And so when it rains here, right behind me and over the hill is our swamp, and the creek runs through it. So with all the rain that's been here the past few months or so, the water here has gotten really high, but it's done a great job of stopping all that dirt from going out into the river and from helping hold on to that water so it's not flooding around. So hopefully when all of this craziness is over, you guys can come out in person, and I can show you this, and we can do it together, and we can go for a walk in the swamp. Thank you so much.